What up, guys? This video is going to be about Andrew Yang's performance at the second Democratic debate in June. Right now it is Friday the 28th, so this is the following day afterwards. And there was a lot of anticipation for this set of debates, quite a bit. I think, if you've been following Andrew Yang at all, one of his biggest problems was just, he has a pretty great platform. It's pretty solid. It incorporates so many different things that pulls people from different walks of life. He's pulling people on the right, he's pulling people on the left, people in the center, libertarians, you name it, and he's getting a lot of popularity for it. He's the internet's favorite candidate, as they say. And so this first round of debates in June is so critical because right now he's polling nationally, he's hovering at 2 and 3%. And so the whole idea was that, well, he's polling that low because not too many people are aware of who he is. So the idea is if he gets a platform that he'll get enough attention, garner enough new individuals to be a part of the Yang Gang, and then he can really rocket launch his campaign into, instead of 9 or 10, and really launch himself into the 5 or 6 range, and then eventually, top 4, top 3, and then win the whole thing. So what happened last night? Well, overall performance for Andrew Yang last night, I would give him, and I'm a Andrew Yang fan completely. I plan to vote for him, and based on yesterday's performance, I would say that it was a D. I would say, yeah, probably a D, at best a C minus performance. So it's nothing near an A plus performance, nothing near an A or a B. It was much farther away from that. And there are a few different reasons why this happened, and we're going to go through them each one at a time. So one of the first things that we noticed from the first round of debates is that, and just the nature of debates in general, we know that there are 10 candidates. We know that there are only 2 hours. And at some point, desperation will kick in. And it's not necessarily desperation, it's more an understanding that you need to expose yourself to the American people as much as possible, as quickly as possible. I think one of the most clear examples of that was during the first debates. You have Tulsi Gabbard, amazing progressive, fantastic on foreign policy, and she's a congresswoman. Now, she was asked a question during the first round of the debates about women. I'm not exactly sure what the exact question was, but the question was about women. Now, her answer ended up at war and interventionist war, etc. Now, this was her first real opportunity to actually speak. And so instead of addressing the question, she used it as a platform to kind of bolster her entire campaign message. So it's a very strategic game that you have to play as a candidate, because you can spend your precious time answering the question, right? And then leave the American people potentially bewildered as to what exactly you stand for if there's not another question opportunity for you to answer. So in her particular case, when she got that chance, she completely ignored the question and went straight to what her flagship campaign idea really is all about. And I think it worked out for her. But it just goes to show that this is what happens. So in the second round of the debates, one of the first most interesting things that happened, the first question went to the big dogs. They immediately took a question. They went straight to Bernie Sanders. They went to Biden. They went to Kamala Harris, right? And everybody else, just kind of subsided in nothingness. They didn't really exist as far as the entire debate was going. So Andrew Yang, he came in, he was pretty laxed. And if you follow him on Twitter or on Instagram, you know that, weeks prior to the debates, he was preparing. And there's even a picture of him preparing in some room. I don't know if it was his house or, wherever he was staying. And, you see like little Post-it notes on different objects in the room. And he's standing, practicing. He's practicing what he's going to say, how he's going to say it, trying to get his timing right. It's a whole art to this. And so when he came in on the debates, he came in his standard Andrew Yang, with his standard Andrew Yang flair, He was the only male politician, well, soon to be, I suppose, the only male candidate on the stage without a tie, right? No tie. He was very relaxed. His body language was fairly calm. He had a hand, I believe, toward his side or in his pocket, and the other one on the podium or the stand in front of him. He seemed very, very relaxed. And like I said, if you follow him on Twitter or Instagram, you know that he put out a tweet and he said something to the effect of, I'm so happy that, I don't have to, be like these other politicians where their whole idea of the first round of debates and their first major exposure to the American people is to come up with some, some super zinger, right? Some nice tagline that gets, an applause line. His whole strategy for the first round of the debates wasn't about trying to, make people clap. And it wasn't about attacking other people. It was about presenting himself to the American people, because people just don't know about Andrew Yang. And that was his whole thing. So that was the mode that he came in with. And the problem with that was this. At some point, it went from civil, moderator asks a question, candidates answer the question, to an outright interrupt battle, airtime battle. It became a situation where someone's talking, then someone cuts them off, then this, then that, and that was the nature of it for a bit. But what we noticed is that, it was actually quite effective for particular candidates. You have people like Senator Gillibrand, right? Now, she interrupted quite a bit. If you watch it, if you did watch it, if you rewatch it, you can tell that she was definitely putting the effort forth to ensure that whatever it is that she needed to say would be said, right? And I remember watching, and there was just this anxiety that I felt, because people who love Andrew Yang, they know his platform is powerful. They know that this is the direction that the country must go in order for us to be successful as a society. It's not an optional transition. This is necessary. It's an absolutely necessary component to us succeeding and thriving in a new technological age. And so, regardless of how far, you look into the future, we know that this is a necessary transition that our country must go through, right? And so, we know that this platform is extremely meaningful. And so all, the Yang Gangers want to see happen is for him to expose his ideas to the world. And so when the moderators are calling on all the bigwigs, right? Now, mind you, it's also important to note that you have NBC or MSNBC hosting the debate. These are the exact same people who left him out on various of their news cycles discussing the candidates and who was in the top 10. He qualified for the debates, very early. And he really asserted himself as a top 10 candidate to the point where it was undeniable, yet somehow he was left out in the news cycle for so long. It's literally only been in probably the last 2 weeks that you see NBC and MSNBC actually paying him any real significant attention. So these are the people who are hosting the debates. Now, of course, they're focusing on, the Bernie, the Biden, the Kamala, right? And that is just how the mainstream media will work. And so the problem was, time was going on, and it was going, and it was going, and it was going, and guess what? Andrew Yang was not part of the conversation. They didn't ask him a question at all. They didn't ask him, right? People are bickering left and right. People are getting their airtime. They're doing this, they're doing that. So much is happening. Yet, guess what? Andrew Yang was not part of that conversation. So there was a lot of anxiety in why isn't Andrew speaking up? I could see him there. He would be very calm. It's like, what's going on here? So then, what we noticed, afterwards at some point, they did pass a question to him. But this was really interesting. They passed a question that was literally, it wasn't an actual question, to be completely honest with you. It was more of all right, we kind of feel bad for you, so here's your shot. It was your game-winning shot. We're not going to ask you about healthcare. We're not going to ask you about the actual policies that are in the minds of the American people. Universal basic income should be in the minds of the American people. But here's the thing, it's not, right? So we have to come to terms with the understanding that the American people, their top 10 issues, UBI or the freedom dividend doesn't come close. They're not interested in it. You say, well, UBI definitely affects quality of life. UBI can definitely, address other concerns that the American people may be interested in, such as the wealth gap. It addresses so many of these things, but here's the thing. UBI is not what's in the mind of the American people. Not yet. Not yet. They don't even know what it is. So when you ask him a question dealing with, all these subjects that really aren't, in the space of the American consciousness that they're grappling with. See, the American consciousness, and you may say, well, the American consciousness is certainly a product of the mainstream media. Or you may say the mainstream media is a product of American consciousness. Regardless of whatever it is, one thing we know for sure is it's not in the American consciousness. What is in the American consciousness are topics like immigration. Is it because every week we're talking about it? Hey, probably, right? Is it about healthcare? Absolutely. And that's not a matter of exposure through mainstream media. That's just life experience. That most certainly is affecting a great majority of Americans. Healthcare, right? But these are the questions that Americans really care about, especially Democratic Americans. And these are the questions that are critical for Andrew Yang to answer in order for him to assert himself as a real contender for the 2020 election. That's the reality. So they gave him a question that was kind of about technology, and he took that opportunity and he hit it out of the park. And I was really happy that he had that opportunity. He was uninterrupted, right? And he was powerful in that moment. But here's the thing. That was essentially the one and only thing that he was able to really truly contribute. They had a follow-up question, they asked him, well, how would it work? He broke down the numbers. Awesome. Fantastic. That was great. But the power of Andrew Yang is really in his ability to be shown as more than just a one-trick pony. Because a lot of people actually think Andrew Yang is a joke. Because they can't even fathom the idea that this could be done in the country. They scoff at it. They're like, oh no, that's ridiculous. You break down the numbers, you explain how it works, they still can't even internalize it. It's a big problem. Anyway, so we go on with the debate. There's actually a point where other candidates are actually discussing the quote-unquote important issues, right? And the reason why I say that is because we have to understand that there are critically important issues that are objective. They're critically important, right? And then there are other issues that have some degree of importance, but their level of priority may be inflated. And that exists in the American consciousness in a way where they're not able to understand, they're not able to prioritize appropriately. So regardless of their abilities, we have to recognize that there's a certain priority list in the American consciousness. And as a politician, as a candidate, you have to address that directly. It's not about, what you feel is best or what is actually best for the American people. You have to address what they feel is best, because ultimately they are the ones who will vote for you. So there's actually a point, where the big dogs are talking, the Bidens, the Bernies, so on. They're talking about Medicare, so on. And you can actually see that Andrew Yang tries to pitch in. And guess what? he's speaking.
We expose him for the fraud that he is.
Senator Gillibrand, 30 seconds. I disagree with both their perspectives. Senator Gillibrand, 30 seconds. I disagree with both their perspectives.
And look, oh no. No words. It seems to be the case that his mic is off. Horrible. Absolutely terrible. Right? So it seems to be the case that these mics are coming off and on. Instead of all of them being on, they're coming off and on. And look, here, here's why this is a problem. I remember when, I don't know who was speaking. I don't know if it was Yang himself or, someone on the left-hand side of the stage was speaking. And you could actually hear Bernie Sanders cough. And I was like, or someone on the far right cough. And I'm like, okay, so the mics, when people are talking, are always on for some people. And then when other people are talking, they're off. I said, wow, that's a really interesting thing. So what we learned is that one way or the other, Andrew Yang ended up getting censored, and that is a problem, right? He ended up getting censored. So I didn't really fully understand that. I saw it a bit because I could see him, raise his finger a bit. His hand wasn't fully raised, not like Bernie. It was just, kind of like a little, like you're in class, you timidly raise your hand, that type of thing. And I could see his mouth moving. And I chopped it up at the time that when I saw it, however short the glimpse was, I chopped it up to, he wasn't being assertive enough. But the reality was that his mic was off, right? So we can come up with all of the reasons why that is. We can say, the mainstream media has it out for him. We can say maybe it was just one person in the control room that had it out for him. We could say any number of things, right? But here's what we can't allow to happen again. We cannot allow this to happen again. So immediately, today I got an email from the Yang Gang camp, and Andrew talks about how he's learning, and rightfully so. And I think, he said, something to the effect of, he understood how hard it would be, but he didn't realize it would be like this. Well, Andrew, welcome to America. Welcome to mainstream media. This is how it works. So now he has finally been inducted into the world of mainstream media. He's now immersed enough to realize what types of tactics can actually occur. And I think that moving forward, this is what we have to establish. Andrew Yang is a very brilliant man, right? Very bright. And we need that in this country. Certainly. We need that type of intelligence in the country. There's a saying that I have, right? And maybe it exists somewhere, but I've been saying it. And it goes something like, what defines a leader, a real leader, a true leader, is not just intelligence. Intelligence alone is not sufficient enough. You need more than intelligence to be a great leader. Virtue virtue alone is not enough to be a great leader. If you have all the virtue in the world, but you're not competent enough to make effective change, right? You're in trouble. If you have all the intelligence in the world, without virtue, right? And the ability to discern what is right and what is wrong, guess what? We're in trouble, right? But when you have someone who has the analytical intelligence and the emotional intelligence, right? You really have someone in prime position to garner the masses, right? And pave the right way forward for us all. And I believe that Andrew Yang has those qualities, right? Now, post-debate, there's also a video floating around where after the debate, he went back to his camp. You know, they had like a Yang Gang, meet up.
Next debate, some issues were touched about like climate change. When they ask other questions, you should jump in to answer the question.
No, I agree. And again, there were times when I was like, hey, I want to make a contribution on climate change or education or other things. And my mic didn't work. Your mic's actually not on. And so I would just start talking. And then the moderators would just ignore and it doesn't matter. So the moderators have a fair amount of power and authority, including someone in production is turning on a mic or not. So there is So I agree with you that I should be interjecting and making more contributions, and I'll certainly look to do that in the next debate. But there were at least a few times where I tried to do that tonight, where I quite literally felt somewhat it's sort of mechanically restricted, shall you say?
And he talks about how, straight from him, he says, I really believe the mic wasn't on. I tried multiple times, and he accepted the criticism that yes, he should have spoken up more. But it's quite a predicament to be in, where yes, you understand you need to speak up more, but how do you speak up and how are you to be heard if your mic is off, right? So going into July and any future event and so on, here's what I believe should happen. Andrew Yang, likely, is my understanding, was preparing for a debate. He was preparing for a debate. He didn't prepare for mainstream media using their tactics to silence him. The way that he should conduct himself moving forward is that someone, some way, is going to try to come after him, and they're going to try to figure out some way to discredit him or silence him. That is the way you have to move forward. So, moving into the next round of debates, here's what you need to do. Go in with the assumption that they will silence you. Start off assuming that your mic is going to be off. And so this is one way, potentially, that you can handle that situation. You see, right now, in the current situation, we have about, anywhere between, I want to say 2 and about 5 second clip of a panned out view from NBC that actually shows evidence that he was trying to speak and nothing came through the audio feed. But that's all we have, right? And trust me, the most dishonest among us will look at that and say, well, you know, well, maybe he wasn't speaking loudly enough. Maybe there's a threshold for, the volume level, volume power level. He didn't exceed that. He was whispering. Or maybe it was an auto adjusting, noise floor threshold that adjusted during an applause, and so he wasn't able to be heard. People will come up with all kind of excuses, right? But what I'm saying is this. Moving into this next round of debates, here's what you do. If you suspect that that's what's happening, hit the mic. Hit it. Not just once, multiple times. Make a scene. Hit the mic multiple times, right? Because that will tell you if the mic is on. Hit it multiple times. Okay? And just eyeball the room, right? If you see the moderators start to look at you, that's a good sign, right? They hear something, they see something is going on. So that's the moment that you suspect that your mic is not working, you hit it. But that by itself is not enough. You have to hit it, and you have to speak at the same time. Here is why this is important. Okay? If you hit the mic, and when I say hit it, I'm not talking about, like Mayweather this thing. I'm not talking about, Manny Pacquiao this thing, Deontay Wilder this thing. I'm talking about, just a light tap on the mic to see if it is in fact working, right? Now, if you do this, and if we assume the worst, right, that people are legitimately actively trying to silence you, not just all of the other, lower polling individuals on the stage, but we're talking about you directly. If that is in fact the case, right, it could be that if you tap the mic, that they let it go through, right? They let it go through, and so you're like, oh, well, the mic works. And then when you speak, they take it off. So now you're silenced again. So what that ends up looking like at the end of a debate is when you come to the, with the claim that the mic was off, they'll point to the area where it was on when you tapped on it. Or when you responded to a question directly, they'll say, okay, of course it was on, it was working, right? But they're actively changing it. So what you have to do is you got to hit it and talk at the same time. They can't filter both, right? They can't work to filter both. So if they see you hitting it, they might let it through. If they see you talking, they won't do it. And then, if you notice a problem, this is the most important thing. Forget all those little goofy things that I'm talking about. If you actually notice a problem, the next time you get the mic, you expose them right away. You expose them right away. When the mic isn't working, you wave your hand, you put your hand up, you do whatever it is that you need to do, make a scene. And if you're not heard, open up your mouth, continue talking, make full sentences. Don't just say 2 words and then give up. Say a whole sentence, because that's great video as evidence that they are actively silencing you. It's fantastic evidence. So you have to try. You can't just start off a sentence like, one of the biggest problems facing the average American, right? Let's say that's, part of your sentence. If you speak into the mic and you say one, when you do that and then you give up, that's not a lot of ammo for everyone to actually vouch on your behalf. You have to say a full sentence for us to very, very clearly right? Because the Yang Gang, we already see what's clearly happening. We're talking about everybody else. We're talking about all the Republicans watching. We're talking about all of the Democrats who are not for Yang. We need them all to see something very clear that supersedes any bias for any candidate. We need to make it very, very, very abundantly clear what is happening. Say a full sentence, right? Wave your hand. And when you do get the opportunity to speak, you expose them. And you say, hey, this mic, you know, you can review the tape afterwards, but I said a whole sentence or two, and my mic was completely off, right? So you've got to do that work. And one of the best ways to win against this type of thing is to outwit them. Andrew Yang is a brilliant guy. He's very, very brilliant. And he has to leverage that brilliance when dealing with these other problems, these people who are trying to silence him. He has to outwit them. He has to outwit the situations, because whomever is silencing him, he can outwit them in a heartbeat, in his sleep. So he has to outwit all of these situations that will come against him if he believes that he has everything that it takes to be the president running with his platform. So back to the debates. You know, other than that, you know, he said a few different things, you know, chipped in here and there. He chipped in about China, you know, a little bit about climate change. And, you know, this is a warning to Andrew Yang. When he was at the debates and he brought up $1,000 a month relating to climate change.
I'm going to go down the line here, and I'm asking you, please, for 1 or 2 words only. All right? Please.
Really?
President Obama in his first year wanted to address both healthcare and climate. And he could only get one signature issue accomplished. It was, obviously, healthcare. He didn't get to do climate change. You may only get one shot, and your first issue that you're going to push, you get one shot that it may be the only thing you get passed. What is that first issue for your presidency, Mr. Yang?
I would pass a $1,000 freedom dividend for every American adult starting at age 18, which would speed us up on climate change, because if you get the boot off of people's throats, they'll focus on climate change much more clearly.
Governor,
the audience kind of did like this kind of, I don't know what it was, like a laugh almost, or a kind of, you know, it wasn't an air, you know, when he said that, people weren't serious. Now, I don't know if the audience was reeling after something another candidate said. I don't suspect it was. I think it was a direct response to him saying that what would really help climate change would be $1,000 a month. Here's why this is a warning. Andrew Yang, and I've watched a lot of interviews with Andrew Yang, and in some interviews, he's very specific and direct about what he's going to do about certain issues. And in other ones, he'll get quite lazy, right? Quite lazy. And it's not that he's lazy. It's just the response is very lazy, right? So here's the thing about Andrew. A lot of times he'll do this thing where $1,000 a month is the end-all be-all and will solve so many different problems. When someone asks you about climate change, you don't just take the issue and bring it back to, you know, $1,000 a month. You don't just say, oh, you know what would really help climate change? $1,000 a month, because with $1,000 a month, you'll be able to see the issue more clearly. Look, Andrew is a smart guy. He's been on the debate team. I understand the condition of the country and why you think that might pass. But let me tell you, it's not. That isn't good enough. It's not. It's not good enough. If I ask you about, and he does this quite often, believe it or not, he'll bring up women and domestic abuse and then tie that into $1,000 a month. And the problem with the way that's conveyed is that it comes across as if you implemented this $1,000 a month policy because you cared about women. No, you didn't. Now, do you care about women? Absolutely. Right? Is that part of, a bigger picture? Yes, but let's be honest and frank. The primary reason, your primary drive for $1,000 a month wasn't climate change. Wasn't because women are in abusive relationships, right? Your primary drive wasn't about those things. Those are really subsidiary ideas and concepts that you come up with after you solidify your $1,000 a month idea, right? You come up with $1,000 a month because it makes sense in our ever increasingly technological age. It makes sense in terms of, the rate of job growth, right? And the number of people who will be affected by new technological advances. That's more in line with your primary reason for implementing a universal basic income. Not only that, but it's because it's the right thing. And based on your particular perspective, that Americans are shareholders of this country, right? That we are entitled to a dividend, right? All of that is more in tune with the primary reason why you're implementing it. So when people ask you about specific issues, they don't want to hear, oh, well, you know what would really help? $1,000 a month. The reality is $1,000 a month helps almost every single aspect of life. And so because of that, you can use $1,000 a month for every single issue. You talk about healthcare. You know what really helps for healthcare? $1,000 a month. Because if you have $1,000 a month, that's $1,000 more every month that you can use for your healthcare bills. What about, my kids failing in school? You know what really helped for your kids failing in school? $1,000 a month. Because with $1,000 a month, you can now afford the appropriate nutrition for your children so that they can perform and learn at the levels that they need to, right? You talk about divorce. Oh, you know what? You know what really helped with divorce? $1,000 a month. Because with $1,000, right? One of the biggest reasons why families divorce is due to financial reasons. And so with an additional $12,000 a year per parent, that's an additional $24,000 in the house for a married couple, right? That can definitely help save relationships, decrease stressors, decrease the rate of, divorce, the whole nine. So here's the thing. It is not a difficult task. It's not, you don't have to do any real mental gymnastics. These are things I'm coming off the top with. You can do anything with $1,000 a month. They ask you about anything, you could talk about how $1,000 a month is going to help them. But that's not good enough. Keep the $1,000 a month strictly to what is happening to our jobs. Keep it to that. And if you would like to venture into other ideas about how $1,000 a month can work and make sure that it doesn't come across as a gimmick, what you do is you relay stories. So if there is a woman who is battered, who can be helped with $1,000 a month. You tell the story of a particular woman who can be empowered financially to allow her to come, from this dark abyss, right? You use those stories, but what you don't do is just make these very simplistic applications, these very simplistic, derivatives of $1,000 a month to go with your point. It comes across as gimmicky. And this is a lot of the reason why some people do not take him seriously. Now, like I said, I'm Yang Gang all the way. So regardless, I'm still Yang Gang, right? I'm just saying that these are really important issues that he has to address if he plans to really assert himself as a top contender. I really do. I believe that's most certainly some of the things that he has to, pay attention to, and he has to be very careful with, right? So, he has to go back to channeling his inner debate, his inner debater. Back when he was, I think it was when he was in high school, that he was a debater. But it was definitely at some point in his past. And what we know is that, whatever that debate style was, it's not what we're having right now. The debate style that he had probably, had a few people, you have your opportunity to speak, it was timed, it was neutrally moderated, they would be fair, everybody would get, probably the same question, whatever, right? And it was a civil discourse. This is America. We're not having civil discourse on NBC. That's not what this is about, right? Civil discourse is not at all what we're about, at all, right? I mean, if our last election was any idea about civil discourse, we're definitely not about that, right? Okay? So, these are just things that, he has to work on. He has to work on his anticipation of sabotage. He has to work on understanding what mainstream media actually is. People talk about mainstream media. Why were they talking about this issue? Why were they talking about that issue and ignoring this? Look at what happened to Bernie last time he ran, right? And if we, as the Yang Gang and as Andrew Yang, continue to remain laxed, right? If we think that we're just gonna come in and just win the presidency, just be nice and calm and, chill and, it'll happen. It's not. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. Now, is it true that that's how it should happen? Absolutely. No question about it. That is the way a civil person should actually be. Right? But there's a certain recognition that the society that we live and our level of collective consciousness is not high enough to actually fully appreciate that. Because if we did, the winner of the debate, would have been Andrew Yang, and not the person who's yelling and shouting this person down, and the person who's calling this person old, and this, it's like, it's crazy. So all I'm saying is this: $1,000 a month, keep that idea to AI, jobs, robotics, automation. Keep that as your primary reason for $1,000 a month. Don't start dragging $1,000 a month into climate change, and $1,000 a month into Medicare, and $1,000 a month into women's issues, and $1,000 a month into... No, don't do that. Don't do that. don't bring $1,000 a month into, food costs, and don't bring, all the other issues. Keep $1,000 a month out of it. What America wants to see is that Andrew Yang is not, a one-trick pony. They want to know that he is competent outside of $1,000 a month. And here's the thing. We know that he is. There are plenty of interviews you can pull up, and he speaks very confidently, competently, and accurately about a variety of issues. In fact, if you want to just see details, just go look on his website, right? It's all there. So all we need to happen is really for him to speak just like that when he has the opportunity in front of millions of Americans. The first round of the debates in June, they say over 9 million people tuned in. 9 million. And more was expected for the second round, right? So his first introduction to America was essentially a one-liner. One-liner, no real comments on all the other issues they care about, none on immigration, none on Medicare, none on gun control, right? These are the issues they care about. He wasn't really able to position himself as a candidate that is truly well-rounded and capable of actually, understanding and speaking about all of those issues and to all of those issues in a solution-oriented way. He wasn't able to deliver in that way. And like I said, a lot of that has to do with, yes, he was sabotaged. So you may say, well, maybe it was an accident, maybe it was benign, maybe it was the MSM, whatever the case, from the perspective of his campaign, it was sabotage, right? So right now it's just about how do we move forward. Like I said, if it happens again, make a scene. Wave your hand. Keep your hand high. Don't do a little low hand thing. Keep it high. Use your Yang Gang claw meme. Put that hand in the air. Let the world see that you're trying to say something, because it is important. Right? Make a scene. And even if they silence you, we will have all the evidence that we need to broadcast on every channel in the world to the point where it is fully undeniable. The way that it occurred is only undeniable to Yang Gangers and a select few of honest people here and there. But if you're, a Democrat, and you're vouching for, one of the big names, the Bidens, whatever, they're not interested in you presenting any truth regarding silencing. The only thing they care about is their particular politician. And so what we have to do is make it so apparent that even the most dishonest amongst us have no choice but to concede that yes, in fact, this did occur, right? And that's the way it has to be. It has to be so blatant that the most blind amongst us can see. That's the reality of how the discourse has to be and how it is. So I think that, pretty much wraps it up. Another person I was looking at was Marianne Williamson. It was interesting hearing her speak. I think she was actually pretty quick-witted. She was really quick-witted in terms of how she responded, the way she responded, and so on. So I thought that was great. But the cadence of her voice when she was speaking, as people have been saying, it was like, what year are we in? Like, you were hearing her speak and you're like, what is going on here, right? And then this whole idea of, forget about policies, that's not what got Donald Trump elected. And the reality is she's right. And, charisma is a big big deal in American politics, and it's unclear to what effect Donald Trump has had and will have on American politics moving forward for the rest of the existence of this particular Western civilization. I don't know how much that has impacted everything. This very bombastic, unapologetic, at times childish, this type of way. I don't know how long that's gonna be permeate through American society. And it may be the case that he hit a resonant frequency by being that way, and that's why he got elected. And so you can have all the policies in the world, right? But if you're nice, calm, and collected, maybe that's not going to get you elected. Maybe it isn't, right? So maybe that might get you elected amongst Democrats, but what's going to get real bipartisan support is someone who has charisma. And so Andrew, he doesn't want the zingers. I get that. I understand that. I respect that. Right? And if you want to stick straight to the math, that's great. But I think if anything, we have to realize that sticking to the math is fantastic, but you have to be a chameleon. You have to present the math, right? And he did. And that shows, hey, you're a bright guy, you know what you're talking about. And the interesting thing about it is actually the person that you actually have to defeat, when it comes to your ability to, to use statistics, and, it's actually the moderator. You just have to make sure your numbers are accurate enough that don't present conflict with whatever their numbers are, right? That they're pretty much synchronous to whatever their numbers are that may exist in their heads and in their notes. You just have to be better than that. And so long as you can do that, you essentially don't have to worry about any real pushback, because, when it comes to the math. So that is your way of, displaying your mathematical prowess. And then you have to exhibit your versatility in a variety of subjects. So you have to speak as much as you can. I know he was aiming for 5 to 10 minutes. Guess what? He didn't get that, right? He didn't get that at all. So he did about, 50% of what he wanted, or what he thought would be the case. He did about 50% of that. So he definitely, fell short. But the last component that he has to exhibit, one of the last, is charisma. He has to have charisma. He has to have something that everyone else doesn't. You can't just use the words, it's about how you use them. That's the charisma. You have to have the charisma aspect if you're going to win over the American people this time around. You've got to have the charisma. And Andrew Yang actually does have charisma, right? But he has to use it right away. Andrew came on the stage and thought that this was a mathathon, that he was just going to whip out the numbers and, the whole audience was going to fawn. Well, yeah, the people at home did, the Yang Gangers did. But we got to understand, Donald Trump didn't make people fawn by, coming out as a, as a mathematician or something. He came out, he just said how he felt. And how he felt resonated with the people. And that's how he got elected. And so that is what Andrew Yang has to do. Yes, he has to have the numbers, because the more harsh and, legitimate critiques will come for that. But he has to exhibit that charisma. He has to show that, he can really captivate the minds of the people. He can charm and disarm. That is an actual thing that he has to work on and actually show to the world in order for them to really get on board. Charm and disarm. He has to do that in combination with being honest and forthright. And with that, he'll do well. Right? So, it's a big learning lesson. I know Andrew Yang, is going to learn so much. And I hope the Yang Gang continues to rally for him. We'll see what the numbers look like some point next week. Looking forward to, there's a channel, I believe it's Nerds for Yang. There's a guy there and his son. And, they do videos on the numbers. They look at, Facebook, they look at Twitter, Instagram, recent poll numbers, likability. They really get into the numbers so that we can get an idea of what may be happening on the trail. And, they do a fantastic job. So I want to say shout out to them. Looking forward to their numbers, and we'll see if the debates, had any real effect. Everything that I've said, it's just really talk ultimately, because the only thing that matters is what actually happened. And, I can only speak for myself, but I'm what am I? I am, like 1/10,000th of a dot on a chart, right? So, whatever I think and say doesn't particularly matter. The most important thing is what the bulk of people think and believe. So, a lot of critiques about polling and polling methods and how that works and so on, but it's at least some, statistic that we can sort of get our hands around and do some, preliminary analysis on. And, I look forward to seeing those numbers. I also want to say shout out to, I believe it's Grassroots for Yang, or Yang Gang Grassroots or something like that. It's a guy, his wife, and his son, and they literally go and spread the word about Yang, person to person. Like, they go and actually speak to people, and that's a lot. That's a lot. So I think it's very clear and easy to say that the people who are behind Yang are most certainly the most technologically savvy individuals that you'll find, hands down. You're not going to find the most tech savvy individuals rallying behind, behind anybody else. You're not going to have the most tech savvy people behind Biden. If they are, they're, it's not because, they think he's the best for the country. They probably think he's best for their business, if anything, right? But, that's about it. So I think that, knowing that, as the Yang Gang, we should definitely leverage our abilities, to really make some noise about this particular issue. It's really important, and it's near and dear to so many of us. So, thanks for tuning in. I know this was super long. I have no idea how long it was. But if you're interested in other content like this, let me know. I'm just trying this out. Just trying to see how it works, and if it's receptive in any way. If not, You know, it'll probably stay up for a bit, and who knows, I might even take it down. But you know, if you found any value, give a thumbs up. And you know, if you didn't, or you thought that, you know, something was off, or you know, certain critiques were unwarranted or just wrong, you know, go ahead, give it a thumbs down and tell me why, right? I'm malleable, you know, it's okay, right? This is what it's about. You know, a lot of people I see on these channels, they say, hey, give it a thumbs up, but they don't talk about thumbs down. Thumbs down is important too, right? Now, of course, there's, you know, a certain percentage of detractors. They'll always thumbs down anything. You know, they're just, you know, grumpy. They don't like you, whatever the case. But, you know, if there is something legitimate, you could be a fan of, you know, whatever. You know, if there's something legitimate you don't like, thumbs it down, but you got to tell me why. Tell me why. Tell me, oh, well, I didn't like the way you said this. Or on this line, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And you know what? I'll read it, and you say, you know what? You're right. You know, I was wrong. I was upset. You know, that was unwarranted. I'll change that, whatever. Let me know. Tell me how you feel. Like, comment. And, you know, if you like content like this, hey, if you really care for it, subscribe. And we'll go from there. Yang gang. See you guys next time.